I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. Here we are on a Tuesday, and we are talking AFC West today. But before we get to that, there was a lot of news over the weekend, and as we've started a new week, it's almost like people are in training camp or getting ready to come back to football. The first piece of news, not so good for the Browns. Quinshon Judkins arrested on Saturday on suspicion of domestic violence. He has since gotten bail, but reading the description doesn't sound great. They still have to pursue a few things. I guess, Dennis, I did not realize he has not yet signed his rookie contract yet either. Which might hamper some of those leveraging opportunities that they might have been looking for. But what do you think this does? They came out over the weekend and said that Jerome Ford was their starter anyway. But I think we all thought Judkins was going to do well. All the people I've seen in rookie drafts grabbing him between the third and the sixth pick in the first round probably thought he was going to do well. It has to be a blow, right?
Yeah, from a fantasy football perspective, it certainly puts a damper on the start. That being said, Joe Mixon came back from something kind of similar in college. Ray Rice unfortunately didn't, but if you follow Drew Davenport on Twitter, Drew Davenport FF. So his day job is as a lawyer, and he works. He's had domestic violence cases, and Drew handles the explanations of what the possible outcomes are and how we shouldn't get over our skis and predicting stuff because there's a lot of stuff we don't really know, and he handles it with a lot of sensitivity. We're still in that phase where, shit looks pretty bad for Quinshon Judkins, and I'm sorry that this happened to, it's not his wife. They don't have kids, but this girl or girlfriend, she had the wherewithal to take pictures of it when she finally reported it. She did wait a few days. And, that's not uncommon for people that are victims of domestic violence to really have to process and get to a point to deal with potential fears. It's really not a great situation. I still think Judkins gets his contract signed, whether there'll be some penalties in there, some additional good behavior clauses. I also think he could land himself on the commissioner's exempt list too, at least while some things get sorted out. But, was Jerome Ford really the starter? It's easy to say that now for the Browns, but the Browns do certainly seem like they are cursed. I think in the long run, I think Judkins will still have an NFL career unless additional stuff comes out about other issues and other time. I do think he'll be able to kind of move past this. He's going to definitely have to do some counseling and probably some public service work and stuff. And, hopefully he can get that all reconciled. But it's an unfortunate situation for Judkins and the girl, and the Browns.
Yeah, and I think if you have already drafted Dylan Sampson, you might feel a little more eager about that. I've seen him. This obviously happened. I was in the middle of two drafts that had kicked off on Thursday when this popped off on Saturday, and of course Judkins had already gone in the first round of both. But I have seen Sampson get pulled up a little bit. Before I was seeing him go fourth round, maybe later in the third. He went at the top of the third in one. And I think he actually went to the guy who had taken Quinshon Judkins. Like, I better hedge my bets. So be interesting to see. He obviously has a chance. He was a fourth round pick. That's not that, that's not that far back. We were kind of overlooking him because he went to the same team as Judkins, but maybe has a chance in camp. They're going to need more bodies around Jerome Ford. Couple of guys got paid, and that is the two Jets. Garrett Wilson, the receiver, Sauce Gardner, the cornerback, back-to-back days, monster extensions. They were both taken in the first round 4 years ago, so it makes sense them getting extended here. Good move for the Jets?
Yeah, I think so. Their real question is at quarterback, and will their, first-time OC be able to get something out of Justin Fields that other teams have not been able to get out of him. But I think Garrett Wilson is a phenomenal talent. I think Sauce Gardner, probably his rookie year has probably been his best year. He's still a pretty good cornerback. One of the, he's probably top 5, top 10 cornerback still in the NFL. And I think if you're the Jets, you want to keep your good young players because that's how you're going to build the team. Would it be better if they were like second-year players and they didn't have to do this for a couple more years for this new coaching staff? Sure. But the team has some work to do, and you want to lock down a couple anchors, one on each side of the ball. I think it's definitely a good move. I'm not sure if Garrett Wilson called up Terry McLaurin and kind of rubbed it in that he got his deal done. But I think that, Wilson's the show right there now when it comes to wide receivers.
The show, the only option. They don't really have a lot behind him at receiver. They have an interesting new tight end prospect, unless you're back on the Allen Lazard train. I have not re-entered that train.
Don't you have to have been on the Allen Lazard train to get back on the Allen Lazard train?
Yeah, probably. A couple other receivers. You mentioned Terry McLaurin said today he's upset by lack of...
Did you mute yourself?
No.
Because I can't hear you.
Terry McLaurin said he is upset by lack of contract movement. Meanwhile, Jawan Jennings said he wants a new contract or a trade. Last year, he was wide receiver 24 for the San Francisco 49ers. And obviously, a guy that they kind of need, what with Brandon Ayuk potentially being slow to come back, Ricky Pearsall working back in. They traded Deebo Samuel, so that is going to be an interesting one to watch. He signed an extension last summer, but is moving into a contract year, set to make about $7.5 million this year. So he said he wants a contract extension or a trade. McLaurin said he doesn't want to leave Washington. That's his home, but he is talking about holding out. Dennis, what do you think comes of these two?
Well, I kind of feel like Jawan Jennings has maybe a little more leverage, in part because he you're obviously not going to pay him as much money as Terry McLaurin. And with Ayuk injured, coming off an injury, and Ricky Pearsall having a little soft tissue issue already, it seems like San Francisco, having traded Debo away, will probably get something done. Juwan Jennings, make no mistake about it, though, he is at best their fourth option when Ayuk is healthy. He's going to be behind Ayuk, McCaffrey, and Kittle. So him and Pearsall will be battling it out for that target number 4 position. I think McLaurin, the challenge he has is that he's going to be 30 in that exactly 2 months from today. He's still a very, very good receiver, 6 foot, 210, very fast, great route runner. I think he's got definitely more runway than Debo Samuel. I think he's the dominant wide receiver in Washington. I just think at 30, Washington probably doesn't want to give him a 4-year deal. They probably want to go 3 years. And at 3 instead of 4, he's going to want more money per average annual value. And right now, we're kind of in that gamesmanship stage of negotiations. He hasn't held out yet, but I think that I'm optimistic that they get something done. I look around that team, and I certainly, I'm not looking forward to sliding Luke McCaffrey into my Terry McLaurin slot if I am the Washington Commanders.
I mean, it could be worse than that. You could be sliding Michael Gallup into that Terry McLaurin. It's not as bad as it would have been for them last year because they did trade for Debo Samuel. But, obviously last year of his contract, I understand why he wants, but he's sitting at 25.5 right now. Washington didn't look like they had a whole lot of cap space left. I'm looking at cap, although no, it says they still have 21 million in cap space left. I would think too, he's probably trying to get a deal done before, we both probably think Jaden Daniels is going to be in for a monster extension. So you're going to want to get in.
No way.
Ahead of those kind of things.
Yeah, and he probably wants to get it done now. Daniels is 2 years away from his extension. So, but it'll be big. So if I'm McLaurin, I'm probably looking to say, hey, let's front load mine. So when you have to pay him, I can still be here and producing for you.
And the guy who did get a big contract is Chiefs guard Trey Smith. He was on the franchise tag. They beat the deadline, got a deal done. Good for the Chiefs.
I think it's great for the Chiefs. He's one of the best guards in the NFL. And, their issue, basically since they gave Patrick Mahomes $500 million, they've had to figure out how can they still invest money in their offensive line. It really showed at the tackle position last year. This year, they brought in a rookie, Josh Simmons. They signed a free agent out of San Fran and Jalen Moore. Jawan Taylor is back. Wanye Morris is back. So they do have some experience. But Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith are really the anchors of that offensive line. Hopefully Josh Simmons bounces back from his knee injury, is able to start the season. But I do think they feel pretty good if Simmons has to miss a few games at the beginning of the year. They like his talent. They spent a first-round pick on him. Having him on the left side with Smith and Taylor on the right and Creed Humphrey at center, I think they're in good spot. Their left guard, Kingsley Suamataia.
I think it's Kingsley Suamataia.
Is a second-round pick last year. So they are investing some draft capital in the offensive line. They're just, Trey Smith was a 6th-round pick who panned out and is one of the dominant guards in the NFL. So given what their run game projects to look like, having a great pass blocking team with those wide receivers that can get down the field in Worthy, Brown, and Rice is definitely going to be an asset to keep Patrick Mahomes upright.
Last bit of news, Shamar Stewart, the 1st-round pick for the Cincinnati Bengals. It's been an interesting news day for him. He left the Bengals during their mini camp, still has not signed his rookie contract. They seem to be far apart. He is back at Texas A&M, where he went to school, working out, and a report earlier today was that he was strongly considering requesting a waiver to go back to college so he could go back into the draft in 2026, which would be a real bad sign for the Bengals. Later this afternoon, there was another report from the Cincinnati Enquirer that he's still preparing for his rookie year in the NFL. They're just haven't settled on a contract yet. The Bengals need help on defense. They got the offense locked up. Things are still a little rocky with Trey Hendrickson. Now Shamar Stewart, not even with the team, back working out with his college, whether he plans to try to re-enroll there or not. What do you make of this situation?
So what I am fairly certain of is that he's not going back to college. I don't see any scenario where he can pull that off. They have some pretty strict rules about, hey, once you declare, sign with an agent. And I know the NIL era is different, but there's still pretty strict rules.
Apparently there is a loophole. I read the article today. That's when I was first intrigued. I'm like, be interesting to see. I'm not saying it's easy, but apparently there's a waiver you can do that then allows you to go back to college for a year and then go back into the draft. I don't think they usually expect to see 1st-rounders do it.
Right. Now, I don't see it happening. I think they end up getting it done. It's an odd situation. I expect they'll get Hendrickson done as well. In part, that I feel like Joe Burrow is going to be like, come on, guys, what are we really doing here? You're going to quibble over a couple little things like this when this was an obvious weakness of our defense. And, it was Trey Hendrickson and 10 guys.
But how much more can Joe Burrow go after them? Because he already told them they had to sign the receivers, which they, for a franchise that's, let's be honest, has been notoriously cheap. They splashed out and did what he asked for there. I think if it was anyone that's going to complain, it's Al Golden, who's like, hey, you brought me in. You told me I have to fix the defense. You drafted me a player that you now won't sign, who's threatening to go back to school, and you have one good defensive player who you also won't sign, who's not here. What are you expecting me to do? And right. I better not hear that I'm on any kind of hot seat.
It's, their defense, even when Hendrickson and Stewart get signed, their defense still isn't going to be great. Like that, I think their hope is to get into the 20s. If I had to say, I'd say like, look, can we be a top 25 defense?
They're still going to have to average probably 30-something points per game on offense to have a winning record.
Yeah, well, they've put that side of the ball together.
They locked that up pretty good, but it's, it's been illuminating to me watching that quarterback series, because you're following Burrow's one of the people you're following, and he had an incredible season last year and was putting up incredible numbers with him and Chase, with Higgins when he was available, with everyone else when they wasn't available, and they still couldn't buy a win because they couldn't stop a fart in the wind. And that was with Trey Hendrickson. If he holds out and your number one pick doesn't come back, they lost a couple of people. I don't, they're arguably worse personnel-wise. Maybe Golden can get them going pretty good, but I don't know that their defensive coordinator was all their problems last year.
Oh, it was definitely personnel or lack of personnel.
Well, let's move to a team that didn't have personnel problems, and we're going to preview the AFC West. We're going in order of finish, and that means starting with the Kansas City Chiefs, who were 15-2. Among the players not returning, Carson Wentz, who was their backup last year, is not back. They let go of receivers Justin Watson, DeAndre Hopkins, who actually went to Baltimore, and Mecole Hardman. They also let go of running back Samaje Perine, who went back to the Bengals, and safety Justin Reed. Among those they brought in Captain Jorts, Gardner Minshew from the Raiders, to be their new backup quarterback. As you mentioned, Josh Simmons and Jalen Moore come in to patch up that line. They brought in running back Elijah Mitchell, formerly of the 49ers, and defensive tackle Jerry Tillery. Fantasy finishes last year, Patrick Mahomes was quarterback 11. Kareem Hunt, their best running back, was running back 31. Xavier Worthy, as a rookie, wide receiver 33. Travis Kelce was tight end 5. Noah Gray, tight end 22. They might be getting some big additions, just getting guys healthy. Isaiah Pacheco missed most of last season with a broken fibula and decidedly did not look like himself when he came back. They also lost Rashee Rice, I believe, in week 3 or 4 to a torn ACL, was out for the year. He should be back. And Hollywood Brown, who was one of their free agent signings last year, got injured preseason and hardly played at all. So even though those players were technically on the squad last year, they didn't really get the benefit of that. So, Dennis, when it comes to fantasy, obviously they've rebuilt this offensive line. They haven't been, in the past couple of years, quite as robust passing as they were at the beginning of Patrick Mahomes' career, but they have the potential to have 3 pretty nifty receivers, a couple of good tight ends, and a decent patchwork backfield for Patrick Mahomes behind a better offensive line. Does that give you some hope going into this fantasy season?
Yeah, it felt like we saw the decline of Travis Kelce. He still finished as tight end 5, but we saw that the Chiefs do a little more downfield stuff with Xavier Worthy and his speed. And then when Hollywood Brown came back with his, getting Rashee Rice back healthy, he's going to, I think, be one of the keys to this offense. Running game is still a conundrum, I guess is the best word for it. Isaiah Pacheco just did not look like he had any burst. Kareem Hunt also did not look like he had any pop in his step at all. Hunt is at that stage of his career where he's going to come in, he's going to run the play like it's drawn up. You need 3 yards, he's going to get you 3 yards. You need 5 yards, he's going to get you 3 yards.
Well, let's be fair. He'll get you, according to his average, 3.6 yards.
Okay. But, I do have some concerns about the running game. I don't know. A lot of dynasty people are on Brashard Smith, but he's going at pick 230. He's going 23 picks ahead of Kareem Hunt. Pacheco's going at 89 in dynasty. As far as in redraft,
and let's talk about Pacheco for a minute, because obviously he missed a huge chunk of time, broke his leg in the 2 games that he played. 15 for 45 and a touchdown against Baltimore. Not great, not terrible. 19 for 90, probably about what you expect. But when he came back, 7 for 44, 14 for 55, 13 for 32, 9 for 26, 6 for 18, got held out of the last week, and had 13 carries for 37 yards in 3 combined playoff games. I thought that was kind of a red flag. He is a 7th round pick who's going into the last year of his contract. I feel like there's an opportunity in Kansas City. I was excited about the Elijah Mitchell signing, but I will acknowledge it's been 4 years since we've seen Elijah Mitchell do anything either.
Yeah. So Mitchell and Brashard Smith are very similar build. They both, they're smaller, quicker backs. I think one of them is going to have to step up. And, if I had to put money on one of them, I'd go with Mitchell because he's not a rookie. But they do like Brashard Smith. I think Pacheco's going to be a grinder now. Him and Hunt are going to basically split those first 2 down carries. Now, Hunt can be a little effective in the passing game and in the pass blocking. So if Mitchell can't pick that up, and then before Pacheco's injury, he was being used in the passing game more. So it just feels like there's nobody for fantasy in the backfield that you can really count on. Now, maybe by week 8, we have some clarity. Week 6, there's some clarity there that says, okay, this guy is going to be flex worthy week in and week out. But I just don't know who that guy is going to be. It feels like it's going to be a very, very pass-heavy offense. They're going to take some shots with those fast wide receivers. They're going to use Kelsey and Rice underneath. Noah Gray's still going to be involved. And so for me, in a redraft, I'm still drafting Kelsey. He was tight end 5 last year. Where is he at? He's going off the board at tight end 6, pick 93. I think if he slides past 100, I'd probably be more interested in him because once you get past those first, 2 or 3, Bowers, McBride, Kittle, in redraft, I'm not necessarily going to invest at cost in a tight end. So at pick 93, I'm probably not going to have much Travis Kelce. My interest is going to be, will one of these wide receivers step up and be Tyreek Hill dominant when it comes to getting the targets and earning the targets? Is that going to be Rice? Is it going to be Worthy? Will somebody get a big enough target share that you're like, I'm going to stick him, that you're not thinking, let me put him in as my wide receiver 3 and hope, but they're probably flex worthy. Ideally, you want one of them to start to demand 10 to 12, 14 targets a game to be able to say, I can count on this guy as a wide receiver 1 or 2 on a weekly basis. If I had to put money on who that's going to be, I would probably go with Rashee Rice. If I'm looking for a wide receiver 3 with big play upside, I'm going with Xavier Worthy. And if I just want a piece of this passing game, I'm going with Marquise Brown, who's going an ADP of 136, wide receiver 61. And it's like, he's the cheapest. So that would be where I'm headed.
And, I get the argument for Rice because he only played 4 snaps in week 4 before blowing out his knee. So really 3 games, he saw 29 targets. So that would be right on that, 10 targets per game. He got 24 for 288, 2 touchdowns. He was tracking toward that. It just feels like a couple of things that work against him is we've seen players take, while they play the next year after a big knee injury, they're not usually as good as they would be 1 year removed. So how much is that going to slow him down? Hollywood Brown also coming back. Xavier Worthy, when they started last season, Brown was unable to play. They really didn't have a lot of other pieces. Xavier Worthy was a rookie, and they took a couple shots at him, but there were still a lot of questions. Kelsey got off to a miserable start. Everything kind of broke perfectly for Rashee Rice, who caught 24 passes, made the most of it, had 200-yard games in those first 3 weeks. He's going to have probably more competition, and I would wager be a little slower off the start. I still think he finishes the highest for them in fantasy, but I have him more like low end wide receiver 2, high end wide receiver 3. I think Worthy has earned a role, and I think a healthy Brown is going to get targets too, and they're going to use Kelsey. And I think they really have found something the last few years in spreading the ball around and diversifying their offense a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see. I know they also have the rookie Jalen Royals, who they brought in. What kind of role is he going to play? Juju Smith-Schuster still kicking around. They brought him back. As you mentioned, Noah Gray. What are they going to do in that backfield? Are they going to have some targets? So I think there are a lot of going to be spreading it around. And if you were grabbing Rice thinking you were going to end up with like a top 12 receiver, that first month of the season might be a little rough. They also have not the easiest schedule to start. They open the season on Friday night on the road in it's either Mexico or Brazil against the Chargers. I mean, these are not great early matchups. I think they have an early game with the Ravens. Their second week, I think, was with the Eagles. So I think it's going to take a little while for them to work it out and to get online as well. The backfield, I'm with you, is like a total mess. Take a guy, have him as your running back 4 or 5, and don't depend on him, and somebody's going to break. And good luck.
People believe in Rice. He's currently going off the board at pick 21, wide receiver 12.
Well, and for Dynasty, I don't think that's bad. I'm just saying.
No, that's in redraft.
Well, I'll pray for you. Good luck for you. Although that is, I mean, wide receiver 21, you mean? Not pick 21 overall?
No, pick 21, wide receiver 12.
Oh, well, I just don't. I think there's less of a chance that he returns right and picks up that form. If he had a whole strong season, he hasn't played in a while coming off those injuries. I don't know about that.
So Xavier Worthy is wide receiver 23 at pick 44. Marquise Brown, wide receiver 61 at pick 137. And Jalen Royals, wide receiver 94 at pick 236.
People are a lot more bullish on that offense taking off than I am. The number 2 team in the West was the Los Angeles Chargers. They finished 11-6 in the first year under Jim Harbaugh, made the playoffs. There are 2 primary backs from last year. J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards are gone. Gus Edwards unsigned. J.K. Dobbins moves inside the division. We'll talk about him in a minute. Wide receiver Josh Palmer left for the Bills, as did defensive tackle Joey Bosa, and they also lost corner Christian Fulton. They did reload in the backfield. They picked up Najee Harris from the Pittsburgh Steelers. They also drafted North Carolina. They also drafted Omarion Hampton in the first round. They brought back wide receiver Mike Williams. They drafted wide receiver Trey Harris. They brought in tight end Tyler Conklin, tackle Mekhi Becton. They also brought in corner Dante Jackson, and they have an interesting tight end prospect in Arondé Gadsden II, who has made some waves at rookie minicamp. Justin Herbert was quarterback 12 last year. Najee Harris was running back 20 for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Ladd McConkey, an excellent rookie year, wide receiver 12. Quentin Johnston, better than he had been, finished as wide receiver 39, but still wasn't always great or consistent, and clearly the Chargers felt like they need some help. Tyler Conklin was tight end 18 with Aaron Rodgers and the Jets last year. A lot of new faces. We know Ladd Conkey and Justin Herbert are back, but everybody else around them kind of changing up. What are you expecting from this team in fantasy?
So if I'm looking at the ADPs, the drafters are thinking it's going to be a low volume offense. Justin Herbert, QB 17. Ladd McConkey, wide receiver 11. He's the one that if they're saying, hey, we think that this passing game is going to go through Ladd. Their second wide receiver is Trey Harris, and he's projected or being drafted as wide receiver 55 in redraft at pick 109. Quentin Johnston is going off at wide receiver 63, pick 149, and Mike Williams, wide receiver 116 at pick 268. Mike Williams feels like the value here, but I just don't know what to expect from him.
He's already on the pup list.
I'm not even sure what they're looking. They're not even super bullish on the running game because Hampton is being drafted at running back 15 and Najee running back 34. So it looks like drafters are like, yeah, these are good players, but they're just in a situation where it's not going to be a high-flying, lots of points scored offense. So we're going to target Ladd McConkey as a low-end wide receiver too. Going to target Omarion Hampton as a RB2. In one QB leagues, I could see the argument for Justin Herbert not even being drafted. Right now, he's going off at QB 17. So, in tight end, Tyler Conklin, tight end 33, Gadsden, tight end 40, Disley, tight end 43. There's fantasy drafters have no real interest in the Chargers tight end position. And really they want Ladd McConkey because they think he's going to get a high percentage of the pass targets, and they want Omarion Hampton, and that's pretty much it out of this offense.
Yeah, I think Harris will be good for redraft this year, but it's hard to know. He's on a 1-year deal. They've talked about 1A, 1B. I do like Omarion Hampton. Justin Herbert, I think, in the QB2 range isn't terrible, but he had arguably the same situation last year and maybe lesser options and finished as QB12. Tight end, probably better for NFL than fantasy. Disley will be in the mix. Conklin was interesting to me, but it's hard to know exactly what they're going to do. I do think Ladd McConkey is probably the one set it and forget it in this lineup. In Superflex, I still think Justin Herbert is too, unless you have two great options. But running backs, you're probably going to have to watch a little bit of the distribution. If one of them gets hurt, the other one soars, I think. But you're going to have to watch the distribution a little bit, because even when J.K. Dobbins was doing well, they were still mixing in Gus Edwards and Kamani Vidal last year. So how
much of that was perception about Dobbins' knee coming off the injury?
Well, you have Hampton, who's a rookie, though, too. So, I think they're going to use both of them. And in fact, if you were following maybe the logic of now and the future, you would probably put a lot more on Najee Harris, who's on a 1-year deal, and let him go out there and grind and bring Omarion Hampton along and let him develop and soar, because he's your future. But we'll see what they end up doing. I like Trey Harris for Dynasty. He could end up being their wide receiver too. Mike Williams already on the PUP list, which isn't a great sign. I'm not really into Mike Williams or Quentin Johnston in Dynasty. In redraft, they're kind of maybe end of the bench guys. I don't know. Mike Williams was really bad with the Jets and Steelers last year, outside of like one hero game with the Steelers where he caught that immaculate pass from Wilson that helped them win a magical game. He did nothing as a free agent and kind of had to come back. And Quentin Johnston's just a little too unpredictable for me. And I think that's why they went and took Trey Harris and why they brought back Mike Williams. This might really be a team where, in terms of fantasy, the two running backs, the primary wide receiver, and the quarterback are about all the people you feel good about, and you're rostering other people but not counting on them to start.
Yeah, from a dynasty perspective, Herbert, Hampton, and Herbert, Hampton, and Harris are going about 10 spots higher in dynasty. McConkey is going right on at wide receiver 11 in dynasty and redraft. So people believe in Ladd McConkey.
Next up, the number 3 team in the division was the Denver Broncos, who finished a surprising 10-7 and actually made the playoffs. Among those who departed, quarterback Zach Wilson went to be Tua's backup in Miami. Running back Javonte Williams went to Dallas, where he could end up being the starter. Little Jordan Humphrey, wide receiver, went to the New York Giants. And Cody Barton, their linebacker, moved on. Among the additions in the draft, they picked up R.J. Harvey at running back. In free agency, they grabbed J.K. Dobbins at running back from the Chargers. They grabbed wide receiver Pat Bryant in the draft. In the free agency, they got tight end Evan Ingram, linebacker Dre Greenlaw, safety Talanoa Hufanga, and they drafted cornerback Jahdae Barron. Fantasy finishes Bo Nix QB7 in his rookie year, a kind of under the radar rookie of the year competitor. J.K. Dobbins finished as running back 24 last year with the Chargers. Jaleel McLaughlin, undrafted free agent that they still have, was running back 45 for the Broncos last year. Cortland Sutton, wide receiver 15, was incredible. Marvin Mims had his moments, wide receiver 57 in year two. Javon Vele, the 7th-round rookie, was wide receiver 57. Dennis, the Broncos didn't make any substantive moves at wide receiver, but they did bring in a tight end, and they greatly improved their backfield. What are you expecting this to mean in fantasy?
Evan Ingram, the talk has been, he's going to be the Joker. And it feels crazy to me because I just don't see him like a Taysom Hill type, which is what I picture when I think Sean Payton's Joker. So obviously, at least to me, it feels obvious that Ingram's going to get some opportunity, but he's not going to get the same types of opportunity that Hill did. I don't see Ingram lining up in the backfield and having games where he takes 6 handoffs. I don't see him throwing 3 or 4 passes a game. Do I see him on jet sweeps? Yeah, I could see that. Do I see him working the short area and then trying to use the speed mismatch against linebackers or size mismatch against safeties? Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, another year removed from injury. How does J.K. Dobbins hold up? Sean Payton, we've seen a couple tweets from him with R.J. Harvey and Payton's daughter all smile. So it looks like Sean Payton is really excited to have R.J. Harvey on the team. But is it going to be more of a 2-back offense like he ran with Ingram and Kamara? Is that really what we're looking for? So is Dobbins going to be the Mark Ingram and Harvey the Alvin Kamara? You've talked that you feel like Jaleel McLaughlin's kind of going to be phased away a little bit. Audric Estime really didn't do a whole lot to earn much more opportunity. Estime's barely being drafted at pick 283. But Harvey is going about 60 picks, almost 60 picks ahead of Dobbins. So even in redraft, they believe that Harvey is going to get a ton of opportunity. I don't know how strongly. I don't know that I'm ready to kind of commit to that. Him getting a 65% touch share, which it feels like if you're drafting Harvey at 21 and Dobbins at 38, it definitely feels like Harvey should be getting a huge workload. I just don't know if I see that. He's another one of these 200-pound running backs. For me, Bo Nix is the guy I want from this offense. He showed last year that he wasn't just a throw the ball behind the line of scrimmage guy. He developed really good chemistry with Cortland Sutton. He also rushed for over 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. And if I can get that out of my quarterback, it's cheat code light-ish. If you're getting over 400 yards and 4 touchdowns rushing, Nix is a good athlete. He played a ton of games in college. So it's not surprising that he transitioned to the NFL. I say that in the vein of Brock Purdy and, what's going to happen in Cleveland with Sanders and Gabriel, who are both guys that played a lot of games in college. Are they going to be better suited to transition to the NFL than, guys like Anthony Richardson or Mitch Trubisky, who didn't play a lot of games in college? Cortland Sutton's going at wide receiver 27 after finishing as wide receiver 15. That feels like a bit of a slight. We may be giving Evan Ingram a little too much shine there, but they got Ingram being drafted at tight end 7. So that's, I think Ingram's going to be probably a tight end 1, but is he going to be able to push to be top half? I'm not so sure. And then at the end of the year last year, we saw Marvin Mims come on and make some plays deep down the field. Can he build on that is the real question, because there was a little bit of fireworks between Nix and Mims last year on those deep balls. And if he can stay out of Peyton's doghouse and be on the field, he'll take some end arounds. He's going to run the deep routes and make some plays. I think Mims is a guy I don't mind grabbing as a flex player to see, is there wide receiver upside to his game this year. He's gone off the board at wide receiver 59. I'm down with that. I don't know that I'm going to try to draft him higher than, low end wide receiver 5. But if I'm, he's what? Pick 130. If I'm sitting there in the 130s, I'm okay grabbing Marvin Mims as my wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not sold on Evan Ingram at his price. Be curious to see what they do. I did like the Harvey pick. It's hard to know how they're going to mix in. My thought about, so Denver only kept 3 running backs last year. And I think one of the reasons that Jaleel McLaughlin hasn't played more the last couple of years is because he's an abysmal pass blocker and not much of a pass catcher. And he's kind of a small guy. And I don't know that they, last year he gave them some burst and did some things as a runner that they just weren't getting from the other guys. And that's why I could more see them keeping Audric Estime as like a big goal line back kind of body. But I mean, a couple of times last year, they only had 2 running backs active. A lot of times it was Javonte and Jaleel McLaughlin, or Javonte Williams and Audric Estime, or Jaleel McLaughlin and Audric Estime. So I wouldn't be surprised if Harvey and Dobbins are giving them everything they need if they aren't really concerned with having a bunch of running backs or a bunch of running backs active. And I feel like in the way that they build the roster, that's where I just think McLaughlin could end up being the odd man out, because, he wasn't a big special teamer either. So it's not like they're getting like the big benefit of that, which is going to be something. Once they signed Dobbins, I thought that was kind of a death knell. It felt like they went and got somebody else who can run, who can catch, who's a better blocker. And that was one of the things that really benefited Javonte Williams. He saw 70 targets and caught 52 passes last year because he could be out there as pass blocker and got the dump off role. And so, it's going to be interesting to see how that split, or if they transfer some of those targets. Denver didn't really vacate a lot of targets. I was looking at it today. If you took out Javonte Williams and Josh Reynolds, who played there, and Little Jordan Humphrey and Greg Dulcich, that's still only 146 vacated targets. They threw the ball 570 times last year, which was pretty good, and was a lot more than Peyton's first year when they only threw it 513 times. So how many more targets are there to spread around? They only looked at tight ends, between Adam Troutman and Lucas Kroll 45 times last year. I think Evan Ingram could see a lot more targets than that, but can he stay healthy? That's another question I have. The real struggle for me is what to do with their receivers. They added Pat Bryant, But they still have Troy Franklin, who was a decently selected pick last year, Marvin Mims, and Vele. And all three of those guys were just over 50 targets last year. Mims made the most of his opportunities. He was also the guy that they seemed to use most on end arounds because he had 13 carries. Troy Franklin only had 2, and that was really it for wide receivers and tight ends taking handoffs last year. I like Mims because of where he's being drafted. I think he has a good chance of being their number 2 receiver. I don't know what, last year he was number 5 or 6 in targets, in total targets, because Javonte Williams had more targets. Vele had a couple more targets. Even Troy Franklin had more targets. Those guys just didn't produce as much yardage or touchdowns. Mims certainly looked better in that standpoint. They didn't go get a receiver. They still haven't gotten a receiver other than Pat Bryant, who was like a 4th or 5th round pick to be in the mix. I feel really good about Bo Nix. I feel really good about Cortland Sutton. I agree with you. I think he's getting disrespected a little bit because I think his target share is going to remain largely the same. He has, he had good chemistry with Bo Nix, and they seem to work really well together. So it's going to be interesting to see where the team goes. For Dynasty, I really like RJ Harvey, but I could see it being more of a split. I still think he's, maybe it's not 65%, but I can see 55 or 60%. I think it depends too on how explosive he is. J.K. Dobbins had a pretty good and pretty healthy season last year, but that hasn't always been the case for his career. And that could be a reason why maybe they keep 4 running backs this year and they keep McLaughlin. I just think if they only keep 3, it feels like Audric Estime, however lightly he produced last year, has a more defined skill that's something different than the other guys that they have. Jaleel McLaughlin, I don't know really what he brings to the backfield that a Dobbins or Harvey doesn't, especially since he isn't a good blocker and wasn't a good receiver. That was where I thought he could have picked some things up, but he couldn't do it the year before, so they played Samaje Perine a lot. He couldn't do it last year, so Javonte Williams got out there a lot, so we shall see. The final team in the division is one that also had an enormous amount of change, and that is the Las Vegas Raiders. They finished 4-13 in 4th place. They moved on from their coach, and they brought in Pete Carroll. They moved on from Gardner Minshew, who had come as a free agent, and Alexander Madison at running back, who had come in as a free agent, and tight end Harrison Bryant, who came in as a free agent, as well as corner Nate Hobbs and safety Trevin Moehrig. They traded for Geno Smith to be their new quarterback, reuniting him with Pete Carroll. He comes over from Seattle. They drafted Ashton Janty and signed Raheem Mostert to give them a bolstered backfield. They drafted wide receiver Jack Beck. They brought in guard Alex Kappa, Devin White at linebacker, and Jeremy Chin at safety. Fantasy finishes: Geno Smith was quarterback 13 last year for the Seattle Seahawks. Jacoby Myers, wide receiver 19, probably one of their most underrated offensive players last year for the Raiders. And Brock Bowers, who was a great pickup in the draft last year, finished as tight end 1. What are you expecting from this team in fantasy?
Well, I think they're going to be very run heavy with Ashton Janty and pass heavy with Brock Bowers. Jacoby Myers is their wide receiver 1, and it looks like, according to our lads, the plan is to move Myers into the slot and put Dante Thornton on the outside with Trey Tucker. I could see a lot of 2 tight end operations from this team with Michael Mayer. It's not out of the question that they move Mayer before the season starts. Geno's going to be interesting because, he kind of revived his career under Pete Carroll and a couple of offensive coordinators up there. But is that really going to be is that going to hold? He's got Chip Kelly now, who likes a mobile quarterback. And when Geno came into the league, he was mobile, but he's getting older. I don't think he's really looking to run. What is Geno? Let me click on that here. He's 34 years old, be 35 in October. So I'm not expecting Geno to, be the second coming of Lamar Jackson on the RPO scene. RPO. They got Aiden O'Connell as the backup, and I think he's a serviceable backup. I think that's really what he is. I'm a little excited about drafting Raheem Mostert as my last player, putting him on my bench, as a blind handcuff, because if something happens to Ashton Genty, Mostert is better than Sincere McCormick or Zamir White or Dylan Lobby. He's going to slide right into that RB1 role. And while he might not get the 80% that, Genty will get, he'll get 70%. And I'm being facetious when I talk about Genty getting 80%, but, I don't know that it's out of the question because it's just they don't have a lot of depth. They got a couple guys that have flashed, and then they got Mostert, who's old and was banged up last year a little bit and stuck behind Devin Achane and was only RB 56, but is going to be 32 years old this year, I think. So the wide receivers are a little, adding Thornton to go with Trey Tucker, who when they drafted Tucker, I remember saying when we were doing our draft recaps, why are you spending that kind of draft capital on a kick returner? Well, Tucker went out and I don't know if he proved me wrong. He proved to me he could do a little more than just return kicks. He did provide a nice deep threat. And Thornton is a bigger version of a deep threat. So it'll be interesting to see, like, they list Jack Bash as the backup to Trey Tucker. Will he be able to push for snaps? And if he does, is he really more of a slot guy, which is kind of where I saw him? And will that cause them to move Jacoby Myers outside a little bit? They have Colin Johnson listed as the backup to Thornton, who, while Thornton is a big guy, Colin Johnson is a real big guy, but Johnson doesn't run near as well as Dante Thornton. So that's kind of an interesting setup. He's almost like a power forward out there. So it really comes down to, I don't know that Mayer has enough volume to be a guy you really want to draft. He's a guy that if something happened to Bowers, he could finish in the top 12 versus Bowers, who could be the tight end one. Bowers may potentially get enough volume to be a wide receiver one.
He had 153 targets, 112 receptions, 1,194 yards last year. A lot of wide receivers would kill for that.
Yes, they would. I'm okay with Geno as my QB2 in super flex leagues. I'm not really, chasing him. He's currently being drafted as wide receiver 26. Genty is going RB5, pick 12. So there's a lot of high value guys. Bowers, tight end 1, pick 19. For me, it feels like Jacoby Myers might be a value. He's going off the board at wide receiver 40. Could I see him putting up wide receiver 3 numbers? Maybe even wide receiver 2. Yeah, but it'll depend on, is Geno able to spread the ball around a little more than just Brock Bowers? Because last year, O'Connell and Minshew, they were hyper-focused on getting the ball to Bowers.
But at the same time, Jacoby Myers last year, career high in targets, receptions, and yardage. It was the first time he's gone over 1,000 yards. He had 87 receptions. He had 129 targets. It was really a two-man funnel. He wasn't that far off.
Also, the running game was absurdly bad.
And they weren't throwing to those guys. I mean, I think so. For me, Geno probably in the QB2 range. That makes sense. If you can get him at QB3, that's so much the better. I don't know that they're going to be incredible. Bowers, tight end 1, Ashton Janty, I think top 10 running back. Myers, I would take a shot on. He could end up having value. I don't want any of the rest of their, in rookie drafts, I reluctantly took Jack Beck in a couple places because it was like the 3rd round and it's felt dumb not to, but I'm not bullish on that. I don't know what their passing game and their depth. I had some hopes for Trey Tucker, but that's kind of evaporated, and I don't know about
Trey Tucker is a classic. I got to put somebody in the lineup to cover this flex spot. I hope he catches a long touchdown. That's Trey Tucker.
Yeah. So it's kind of really 2 people I really like and 2 people I would consider rostering, and the rest of it I'm especially in redraft. I think it's too much of a mess to try to figure out at this point what the Raiders are going to do. So that brings us, we've talked about the 4 teams. Last year, the AFC West, surprisingly, preseason, I thought it was the Chiefs, and I wasn't in on anybody else. And yet they ended up producing 3 playoff teams and looking like one of the best divisions. How do you feel about the AFC West this year?
I don't think we're going to see another 14-win team. But I've got the Chiefs winning it in a tiebreaker over the Broncos, and those 2 teams both making the playoffs. I have the Chargers and Raiders actually tying, but both missing the playoffs.
Yeah, I think the Raiders will be better than they were last year, closer to 500, but maybe in the 7 and 8 win range. I think the Chargers probably in the 8 to 10 win range. I liked Denver and Kansas City to be kind of fighting it out on the top in probably the 10 or 11 win range. I never am real bullish about picking a bunch of teams to finish with 14 or 15 wins. It always seems ridiculous. Right. And last year we had 1 in each conference, so stranger things have happened, but I think there's more parity. I think the West and the North are going to, and maybe even the East are going to be a little bit tighter divisions together in the AFC. That'll do it for us today. We will be back on Friday looking at the NFC South, from the penthouse to possibly the outhouse when we have to talk about the Saints. I know you've been waiting all year to talk about how excited you aren't for that fantasy lineup. But Dennis, if people need something to fill up the rest of their week, what can they do?
Go to their favorite podcast platform, hit that search bar, type in the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast. Give us a like, give us a subscribe. Listen to our vast back catalog of shows.
Just so vast. That'll do it for us today. Hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the week. We will be back to talk about the NFC South on Friday.